The richest man in the city didn't know my name for 2 years, until the night he said it. I used to think being invisible was a gift. Invisible people didn't get blamed. Invisible people didn't get dragged into other people's problems. Invisible people cleaned the messes, folded the towels, polished the marble floors, and quietly disappeared before anyone noticed they were there. At 24 years old, I had become very good at disappearing. Every morning before sunrise, I rode 2 buses across Manhattan to reach the Moretti estate. The mansion sat on a hill overlooking the Hudson River, larger than some hotels I'd seen on television. Iron gates. Endless windows. Perfect gardens. The kind of place tourists slowed down to stare at. I arrived before most of the staff because I liked the silence. The mansion felt different before everyone woke up. Softer somehow. Less intimidating. The chandeliers glowed faintly. The hallways smelled like lemon polish and fresh coffee. For a few minutes, it almost felt like a home instead of a monument to wealth. I tied my blonde hair into a loose ponytail, slipped on my cleaning gloves, and started my usual routine. Dusting. Vacuuming. Folding blankets no one seemed to use. Sometimes I wondered how many people actually lived in a house with 43 rooms. The answer, as far as I could tell, was very few. The staff talked about Vincent Moretti in whispers. The owner. The billionaire. The man whose name seemed to carry its own gravity. Most of us rarely saw him. He traveled constantly. Meetings. Events. Business deals. At least that was what people said. I never asked questions. Questions had a way of creating trouble. Around noon, I stepped outside to empty a supply cart near the service entrance. A cold October wind swept across the property, carrying golden leaves across the stone pathway. That was when I noticed someone sitting near the front gate. An elderly woman wrapped in a thin gray coat. She looked exhausted. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat on a bench beside the sidewalk. The security guards hadn't noticed her. Or maybe they had and didn't care. I glanced toward the mansion. Then back toward the woman. My lunch break had just started. I pulled my umbrella from the cart and walked toward her. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I asked. She smiled weakly. "Just resting for a minute, sweetheart." Her voice sounded tired. I handed her the paper bag holding my sandwich and apple slices. "You should eat something." Her eyes widened. "Oh no, honey. That's your lunch." "I'll be fine." She hesitated before accepting it. "Thank you." I shrugged awkwardly. "You're welcome." The wind picked up again. I opened my umbrella and held it above both of us while she ate. It seemed like such a small thing. So small I almost forgot about it entirely. But what I didn't know was that someone had been watching from the second-floor window of the mansion. Someone who never noticed maids. Someone who rarely noticed anyone. And for the first time in 2 years, Vincent Moretti was looking directly at me. The next morning, I convinced myself I had imagined it. People like Vincent Moretti did not notice people like me. That was how the world worked. Men who owned private jets and appeared on magazine covers did not spend their time watching maids hold umbrellas for strangers. By 6 o'clock, I was back on the bus heading toward the estate, my worn sneakers damp from an overnight drizzle and my travel mug filled with coffee that tasted more like determination than anything else. The city rolled past the window in shades of gray and gold. I spent the ride reviewing bills in my head. Rent. Utilities. My mother's medication. Every dollar already had a destination before I earned it. When I arrived at the mansion, something felt different. It was subtle at first. A few staff members stopped talking when I entered the kitchen. Others glanced in my direction before quickly looking away. I checked my uniform, wondering if I had spilled something on it. Did I miss a meeting? I asked one of the housekeepers. She blinked. No. Why? Everyone is acting strange. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. You should probably just do your work today. That answer only made me more confused. The morning passed slowly. I polished silver trays, organized linen closets, and vacuumed 2 guest suites that had not been used in months. Around noon, my supervisor appeared in the doorway of the library where I was dusting shelves. Mrs. Harper rarely looked surprised by anything. Today she looked unsettled. Grace. I lowered the feather duster. Yes? The boss wants to see you. I laughed before I could stop myself. Very funny. She did not laugh back. My stomach dropped. Wait. You are serious? Very. The feather duster nearly slipped from my hand. Why? I was not given that information. Every possible mistake I had ever made flashed through my mind during the walk across the mansion. Had I broken something? Forgotten a task? Violated some invisible rule? The estate suddenly felt much larger than usual. Every hallway seemed longer. Every step echoed louder against the marble floor. Mrs. Harper stopped outside a pair of dark wooden doors. Go in. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my throat. I knocked softly. A deep voice answered from inside. Come in. I pushed the door open. The office was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the river. Shelves lined the walls. A fire crackled quietly despite the mild weather outside. And standing beside the window was Vincent Moretti. He was taller than I expected. Dark hair. Navy suit. Calm posture. The kind of presence that filled a room without effort. For a moment, he simply looked at me. Not through me. Not past me. At me. It was the first time that had ever happened. Grace Carter, he said. My breath caught. 2 years. I had worked here for 2 years. And somehow hearing my name in his voice felt more shocking than being called into the office itself. Why yes, sir? I managed. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. I have a question for you. I swallowed hard. What kind of question? He glanced toward the window. Then back at me. Why did you give your lunch away to someone you did not know? For a second, I forgot how to speak. Of all the questions I had expected, that was not one of them. I stood there clutching the edge of my cleaning apron while Vincent Moretti waited patiently for an answer. His expression gave nothing away. No judgment. No irritation. Just quiet curiosity. I looked down at the polished hardwood floor. She looked hungry, I said softly. The room remained silent. I forced myself to continue. That is all. When I finally looked up, he was still watching me. That is all? He repeated. I nodded. People helped my mother when I was younger. Sometimes strangers. Sometimes neighbors. Sometimes people who barely had enough themselves. I guess I never forgot that. A faint breeze moved through the office from an open window somewhere behind him. The river sparkled beneath the afternoon sun. Everything about the moment felt strange. Unreal. Like I had somehow wandered into someone else's life. Vincent folded his arms. Most people would have kept their lunch. I gave a nervous shrug. Maybe they were hungrier than I was. Something shifted in his eyes. Not amusement exactly. Something warmer. It disappeared so quickly I almost thought I imagined it. He turned toward the window. The woman at the gate was my grandmother. I blinked. Your grandmother? He nodded. She occasionally escapes her driver when she wants a few minutes alone. My face immediately turned red. Oh. She called me after she got home. I wished the floor would open beneath me. I am sorry if I caused any problems. That earned an actual smile. Small. Brief. But unmistakable. You think feeding my grandmother caused problems? I felt even more embarrassed. When you put it that way, it sounds ridiculous. A little. The tension in my shoulders eased for the first time since entering the office. Vincent studied me for another moment before walking toward his desk. He picked up a file and glanced at it. You have worked here for 2 years. Yes, sir. No complaints. I try not to give people reasons to complain. No late arrivals. The buses usually cooperate. His smile appeared again. Slightly longer this time. Usually? New York likes to keep things interesting. To my surprise, he laughed quietly. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough to transform the room. Until that moment, he had seemed almost larger than life. Untouchable. Now, for a second, he looked like a regular man. A tired one. The realization caught me off guard. His office door suddenly opened. A man in an expensive suit stepped inside carrying a tablet. He stopped when he saw me. Confusion flashed across his face. Vincent's expression immediately became unreadable again. The warmth vanished behind calm professionalism. What is it, Daniel? Vincent asked. The man recovered quickly. Your 4 o'clock meeting arrived early. Vincent nodded once. I will be there shortly. Daniel glanced at me again before leaving. The silence returned. Vincent looked back at me. You can go, Grace. Relief flooded through me. Thank you, sir. I turned toward the door. Grace. I stopped. My hand froze on the handle. Yes? His voice was calm. My grandmother would like to see you again sometime. I stared at him. Completely speechless. Then he added something that made my heart skip. So would I. The ride home felt different that evening. Manhattan glowed beyond the bus window, streaks of gold and white reflecting across the glass while Vincent's final words repeated in my head. So would I. I must have replayed them 100 times before reaching my apartment building in Queens. It was a narrow brick building squeezed between a laundromat and a corner grocery store that always smelled faintly of coffee and old newspapers. Nothing about it resembled the world I spent my days cleaning. I climbed 3 flights of stairs and unlocked the apartment door. The familiar scent of chamomile tea greeted me immediately. My mother sat beside the window wrapped in a knitted blanket, a paperback novel resting on her lap. She looked up and smiled. You are late. Long day, I replied, forcing a smile of my own. She studied me carefully. Mothers always seem to notice things other people missed. Something happened. I laughed softly. Why does everyone keep saying that? Because you keep staring at the wall and smiling for no reason. My cheeks warmed. I am not smiling. You are. I dropped my bag beside the couch and changed the subject. How was your appointment? The smile faded from her face. Just slightly. But enough. My stomach tightened. Mom? She looked toward the window. The doctor wants additional tests. There it was. The worry she always tried to hide. The same worry that had followed us for months. Medical bills. Prescriptions. Appointments. Endless uncertainty. I sat beside her and took her hand. We will figure it out. She squeezed my fingers. You should not have to spend your 20s worrying about me. You spent yours worrying about me. Her eyes softened. That was different. No. It was not. For a moment neither of us spoke. The city hummed beyond the glass. Sirens in the distance. Car horns. Life continuing as it always did. The next morning, exhaustion settled heavily behind my eyes as I arrived at the estate. The sky was overcast. Rain threatened from dark clouds gathering over the river. I expected everything to return to normal. I expected to disappear again. Instead, Mrs. Harper found me less than 10 minutes after I arrived. Grace. I looked up from the linen cart. Yes? Her expression seemed unusually careful. Mr. Moretti has requested that you assist with a private dinner tomorrow evening. I stared at her. Me? Yes. There are staff members with far more experience. I am aware. My pulse quickened. Then why me? Mrs. Harper hesitated. Because he specifically asked for you. The hallway suddenly felt too warm. Too quiet. Around us, several employees pretended not to listen while very obviously listening. I could practically feel their curiosity. There must be some mistake. There is no mistake. She handed me a folder. You will receive additional instructions tomorrow. Then she walked away, leaving me frozen beside the linen cart. Across the hall, one of the younger housekeepers stared at me with wide eyes. Grace, she whispered. Do you realize what this means? The truth was I had absolutely no idea. But somewhere on the second floor of the mansion, behind walls of glass and stone and secrets, Vincent Moretti had noticed me again. The following evening arrived faster than I wanted. By 6 o'clock, I stood in front of the small mirror inside the staff changing room, adjusting the sleeves of a new black uniform Mrs. Harper had personally handed me that afternoon. The fabric was softer than anything I normally wore. More expensive too. I felt like an imposter pretending to belong somewhere I did not. Outside, rain tapped gently against the windows of the estate. The mansion glowed beneath hundreds of warm lights, transforming the gray evening into something almost magical. My stomach twisted tighter with every passing minute. Relax, one of the servers whispered as she passed me. You look like you are heading into a job interview. That is exactly what it feels like. She laughed. Trust me. Nobody gets personally requested by Vincent Moretti unless they already passed. That did not make me feel better. At precisely 6:30, Mrs. Harper escorted me toward a private dining room overlooking the river. The doors alone were taller than most apartment ceilings. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished wood. A long dining table stretched through the center of the room, though only one end had been prepared. 2 place settings. Not 20. Not 10. 2. My pulse stumbled. Why are there only 2 seats? I asked quietly. Mrs. Harper avoided my eyes. Because there will only be 2 guests. Before I could ask another question, the doors opened. Vincent stood near the windows with one hand resting in his pocket. The city skyline glittered behind him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I suddenly became very aware of every detail. The sound of rain. The scent of fresh flowers on the table. The nervous beat of my own heart. Mrs. Harper cleared her throat. Mr. Moretti, Grace is here. Vincent nodded. Thank you. The doors closed behind her, leaving me alone with him. Silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable exactly. Just unfamiliar. Finally, he gestured toward the table. Please sit. I hesitated. Sir, I thought I was working tonight. A hint of amusement appeared in his eyes. You are not. Then why am I here? He pulled out a chair across from his own. Because I would like to have dinner with you. I stared at him. Surely I had misunderstood. Dinner? Yes. With me? You are the only other person in the room. My mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Vincent looked almost entertained now. Grace, you spend every day making sure everyone else is comfortable. Tonight you are the guest. I slowly sat down because my legs suddenly felt unreliable. A server entered carrying dinner plates before quickly disappearing again. The food looked incredible. Grilled salmon. Roasted vegetables. Fresh bread. The kind of meal I could never justify buying for myself. Vincent noticed me staring. You do not like salmon? I have never had salmon that expensive before. For a second he looked surprised. Then he laughed quietly. The sound softened something in the room. Fair enough. Rain continued to fall beyond the glass. The river shimmered beneath the city lights. And somewhere between my first nervous bite and his first genuine smile, I began to realize this evening was not an accident. Vincent Moretti had invited me here for a reason. I just had no idea what that reason was. For the first 20 minutes, I kept waiting for someone to walk in and explain that there had been a misunderstanding. Maybe a missing guest. Maybe a scheduling error. Maybe I was sitting in a chair meant for someone else. But nobody came. The dining room remained quiet except for the soft sound of rain against the windows and the occasional clink of silverware. Vincent seemed completely comfortable with the silence. I was not. Can I ask you something? I finally said. He set down his glass. Of course. Why me? His eyes lifted to mine. That is a broad question. Then let me be more specific. I took a breath. You could have dinner with senators, celebrities, investors, or anyone else in New York. Instead you invited a maid. His expression remained calm. You think that makes no sense? Honestly? Please. Yes. To my surprise, he smiled. Most people spend their conversations with me trying to impress me. Maybe they have good reasons. Perhaps. He leaned back slightly. You are the first person in a very long time who seems completely uninterested in doing that. I laughed before I could stop myself. That is because I am too busy trying not to spill water on your table. The smile stayed. Exactly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then his gaze drifted toward the rain beyond the glass. Do you know how many people ask me for favors every week? A lot? Hundreds. I blinked. Hundreds? Business opportunities. Donations. Introductions. Investments. He shrugged. Everyone wants something. The words carried a weight I did not fully understand. And what do you think I want? I asked quietly. Vincent looked directly at me. Nothing. The answer came too quickly to be rehearsed. Too naturally to be a compliment. Somehow that made it feel more genuine. I glanced down at my plate. You barely know me. I know enough. Something in his voice made my chest tighten unexpectedly. Before I could respond, a flash of lightning illuminated the river outside. A second later, thunder rolled across the sky. The lights flickered once. Then the entire room went dark. I froze. The mansion disappeared into shadow. Outside, rain hammered against the windows. For several seconds, the only light came from distant flashes over the water. Great, I muttered. Vincent's voice came from somewhere across the table. Calm as ever. You are afraid of storms. I frowned. How do you know that? Another flash briefly illuminated the room. He was watching me. You tense your shoulders every time thunder hits. My cheeks warmed. I do not. A loud crack echoed outside. Instantly proving him right. His smile returned. A moment later, emergency lights activated throughout the mansion, casting the room in a warm golden glow. The darkness retreated. So did some of my embarrassment. Vincent stood and walked toward the window. Come here. Curiosity overcame hesitation. I joined him. Together we looked out across the river. Manhattan shimmered beneath the storm, thousands of lights reflected on dark water. It was beautiful. I never get tired of that view, he said softly. I nodded. Neither would I. For several quiet seconds, we simply stood there watching the city. Then Vincent said something that caught me completely off guard. Grace, when was the last time someone took care of you instead of the other way around? His question settled over me more heavily than the storm outside. For a moment, I could only stare at the city lights reflected across the river. When was the last time someone had taken care of me? I honestly could not remember. Somewhere along the way, life had become a list of responsibilities. Rent. Groceries. Doctor appointments. Bus schedules. Overtime shifts. Worry. Endless worry. I folded my arms and looked down. I do not know. Vincent remained beside me at the window. He did not rush to fill the silence. Somehow that made answering easier. Maybe when I was a kid. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. Smaller than his. Less certain. My mother always made everything feel safe, even when things were difficult. Another flash of lightning illuminated the room. And now, he asked quietly. I laughed without humor. Now I make sure she feels safe. He nodded slowly as if he understood more than I had actually said. The emergency lights cast warm shadows across the room. Outside, rain continued to fall in silver sheets. Then a sharp chime echoed somewhere in the mansion. Vincent's expression changed instantly. Not fear. Not concern. Focus. The kind of focus people developed when they carried enormous responsibilities. A moment later, the dining room doors opened and Daniel stepped inside. His usually calm expression looked unusually tense. He stopped when he saw me standing there. Sorry to interrupt. Vincent turned toward him. What happened? Daniel lowered his voice. There is an issue with the East Wing. The storm damaged part of the electrical system. Vincent glanced toward the dark hallway beyond the doors. Anyone hurt? No. Relief crossed his face immediately. Good. Daniel hesitated. Maintenance says they need access to the entire section tonight. Vincent nodded. Handle whatever they need. Daniel looked as though he wanted to say something else but ultimately left without another word. The doors closed behind him. I released a breath I had not realized I was holding. That sounded serious. Vincent shook his head. Only expensive. That earned a smile from me. I guess that is better than serious. Much better. He checked his watch. For the first time all evening, he looked disappointed. Unfortunately, I need to deal with several phone calls. I immediately stepped back. Then I should go. Grace. I paused. Yes? Thank you. The simple words caught me off guard. For what? For being honest. My chest tightened unexpectedly. Most people thanked me for cleaning rooms or carrying trays. Nobody thanked me for honesty. I gave him a small smile. You are welcome. 20 minutes later, I was gathering my things near the staff entrance when Mrs. Harper hurried toward me carrying an envelope. This was left for you. Confused, I accepted it. Inside was a handwritten note. Just one sentence in neat, precise handwriting. I hope your mother enjoys these. Attached to the note was a gift card for a pharmacy large enough to cover several months of medication. My hands froze. My heart stopped. Because there was only one person in the entire estate who knew about my mother. I stared at the note all the way home. The paper remained folded in my hands during the bus ride, during the walk from the stop to my apartment, and even while I climbed the stairs. My mind kept returning to the same question. How did he know? I had never mentioned my mother's medication. I had barely mentioned my mother at all. Yet somehow Vincent had noticed. When I opened the apartment door, I found my mother asleep on the couch with a blanket pulled up to her shoulders. The television played softly in the background. For a moment, I simply stood there watching her breathe. Then I looked down at the pharmacy card again. Relief washed through me so suddenly that it almost hurt. Months. It would cover months of medication. Months of one less worry. Months of not choosing between prescriptions and groceries. I carefully placed the card inside a kitchen drawer and said nothing. Some gifts felt too important to explain out loud. The next morning, sunlight poured through the mansion windows for the first time in days. The storm had passed. Everything seemed brighter. Even the gardens looked different. As I pushed a cleaning cart through the west hallway, I noticed employees smiling more than usual. Conversations felt lighter. The entire estate seemed to breathe easier after the weather cleared. Around noon, Mrs. Harper approached carrying a clipboard. "Grace." I looked up. "Yes?" "Someone would like to see you." My pulse immediately quickened. "Who?" A familiar voice answered from behind me. Hopefully not someone terrifying. I turned and found an elegant older woman standing near the staircase. Silver hair. Bright eyes. The same woman I had shared my lunch with outside the gate. Vincent's grandmother. She opened her arms before I could react. "There she is." I laughed as she wrapped me in a surprisingly strong hug. "It is good to see you again." "And you, sweetheart." She stepped back and studied me. "You are even prettier when you are not holding an umbrella in a windstorm." My cheeks warmed. Mrs. Harper looked completely stunned. So did several nearby staff members. The older woman noticed immediately. "What?" she asked innocently. "I like her." Then she lowered her voice. "Besides, anyone willing to give away lunch in New York City deserves a medal." I laughed despite myself. For the next hour, she insisted on showing me old family photographs displayed throughout the mansion. Pictures of holidays. Birthdays. Generations of relatives smiling beside Christmas trees and summer lakes. It felt strangely personal. Like being allowed to glimpse a side of the family nobody else saw. Eventually we reached a photograph of a much younger Vincent standing beside his grandmother. He could not have been older than 10. He was smiling. Actually smiling. The sight stopped me cold. "I know that look," she said. "What look?" "The one where people realize my grandson was not born looking serious." I laughed. She smiled knowingly. "He used to smile all the time." Something about the sadness beneath her words lingered with me. Later that afternoon, as I returned the photographs to their proper place, I noticed someone standing at the end of the hallway. Vincent. He had been watching the entire interaction. Neither of us spoke. He simply nodded once. A silent thank you. And somehow that single look meant more than all the expensive gifts in the world. Over the next few weeks, something subtle began to change inside the estate. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The atmosphere felt lighter. People lingered longer in conversations. The kitchen staff laughed more often. Even Mrs. Harper seemed less intimidating on certain mornings. It was as if the mansion had slowly remembered how to breathe. One Friday afternoon, I walked into the staff dining room carrying a tray of coffee and nearly stopped in surprise. Half a dozen employees sat around a table sharing homemade cookies. Normally everyone ate quickly before returning to work. Today they were smiling. Talking. Enjoying themselves. "Grace," one of the gardeners called. "Come sit with us." I laughed. "I still have 20 minutes of work left. 5 minutes will not destroy the estate." To my surprise, he was right. 5 minutes became 10. Then 15. Before long, stories filled the room. Childhood memories. Terrible first jobs. Embarrassing mistakes. For the first time since I started working there, I felt less like an employee and more like part of a family. The strange thing was that nobody could explain exactly when it started. Yet somehow people kept tracing it back to the same period. Around the time Vincent began appearing more often. Around the time his grandmother started visiting regularly. Around the time I became impossible to ignore. One afternoon, while organizing books in the library, I found a small stack of novels waiting on a side table. A handwritten note rested on top. "Thought your mother might enjoy these." No signature. None was needed. I smiled despite myself. The books went home with me that evening. My mother finished the first one in 3 days. The second in 4. The third became her favorite. "Your mysterious friend has excellent taste," she declared from her spot beside the window. I pretended not to hear the emphasis on mysterious friend. Back at the estate, Vincent and I crossed paths more frequently. Sometimes it lasted only a few seconds. A greeting in the hallway. A shared cup of coffee in the kitchen before sunrise. A brief conversation near the gardens. Yet every interaction seemed to linger long after it ended. One crisp autumn morning, I found him standing near the greenhouse watching workers prepare flower beds for winter. "Good morning," I said. "Good morning, Grace." The sunlight caught the edges of his dark hair. For once, he looked rested. "You seem happy today." I smiled. "Maybe because the weather is perfect." He glanced toward the bright blue sky. "That is your explanation?" "It is a good one." His eyes narrowed playfully. "I suspect there is another reason." Before I could answer, laughter drifted across the gardens from a group of employees sharing lunch nearby. Vincent followed the sound. A thoughtful expression crossed his face. "The staff seems different lately." "Different good or different bad?" "Good." I looked toward the laughter. "Maybe people are happier when they feel seen." The words escaped before I could stop them. Vincent went very still. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then his gaze met mine. Deep. Steady. Unreadable. "Perhaps," he said quietly. And something in the way he said it made me wonder if he was talking about far more than the staff. The truth arrived on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. No thunder. No dramatic warning. Just a quiet moment that changed everything. I was carrying fresh linens toward the West Wing when I realized I had taken a wrong turn. The mansion was so large that even after 2 years, certain hallways still felt unfamiliar. I checked the room numbers and sighed. Somehow I had wandered into a private section rarely used by staff. Turning around should have been easy. Instead, a partially open door caught my attention. Voices drifted through the gap. Serious voices. I never intended to listen. In fact, I took 2 steps away before a familiar name stopped me. "Vincent." Instinctively, I froze. "The board approved the transfer," a man said. "The Chicago operation is officially under Moretti control." Another voice responded. "That eliminates the last obstacle." I frowned. The conversation sounded less like business and more like something else. Something I could not quite define. Then I heard Vincent speak. Calm. Controlled. No unnecessary pressure. "I want every agreement honored exactly as promised." "Understood, boss." Boss. The word lingered in the air. Something about the way they said it felt different. Respectful. Careful. Almost cautious. My stomach tightened. Before I could think further, another man spoke. "The families in Boston already accepted your authority. The remaining groups will follow once they see the results." Families. Groups. Authority. A strange unease settled over me. I quietly stepped away from the door and continued down the hallway. But my pulse refused to slow. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Every conversation felt distant. Every task felt automatic. By evening, curiosity had completely overwhelmed me. Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and typed Vincent Moretti's name into a search engine. Thousands of results appeared instantly. Business magazines. News articles. Interviews. Charity foundations. Real estate acquisitions. Investments. Economic conferences. The successful billionaire image I already knew. Then I noticed a smaller article buried several pages down. The headline mentioned influence. Power. Private networks. Families with decades of history. I clicked another article. Then another. A pattern slowly emerged. Nothing illegal. Nothing sensational. Yet every article hinted at the same thing. Vincent's influence extended far beyond business. Politicians sought his support. Executives competed for his approval. Entire industries adjusted when he made decisions. He was not simply wealthy. He was powerful in a way I had never fully understood. The realization unsettled me more than it should have. Because suddenly every moment replayed differently in my mind. The private dinners. The guarded conversations. The way people watched him. The way people obeyed him. The way entire rooms shifted when he entered. I stared at the glowing screen long after midnight. My chest felt heavy. Not because he had lied exactly. He never claimed to be anything else. The problem was that I had started seeing the man. The tired smile. The thoughtful gestures. The grandson who loved his grandmother. The man who secretly helped my mother. And now I was being forced to remember the other side. The side the rest of the world saw. I closed the laptop and looked out the window toward the city lights. For the first time since meeting him, I wondered if I truly knew Vincent Moretti at all. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in nearly a year. The decision felt wrong from the moment I made it, but I could not bring myself to walk through the estate gates pretending everything was normal. My mother noticed immediately. She sat across from me at the small kitchen table while sunlight streamed through the window. "You have been staring at that coffee for 20 minutes. I glanced down at the untouched mug. "Sorry. You are worried." I laughed softly. "You always know. That is part of the job description." Her smile faded slightly. "Is this about Vincent?" Hearing his name out loud made my chest tighten. I looked away. That was answer enough. My mother studied me carefully before speaking. "Did he do something?" "No." "Then what happened?" I searched for the right words. "I realized I do not really know who he is." Silence settled between us. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled down the street. Somewhere in the building, a neighbor played music too loudly. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life. Yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. "Grace," my mother said gently, "sometimes people can be more than one thing." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means a person can be powerful and kind. Successful and lonely. Complicated and good." I looked down at my hands. "You make it sound simple." "It never is." That afternoon, my phone buzzed 3 times. The first message came from Mrs. Harper asking if I was feeling better. The second came from Vincent's grandmother demanding that I stop worrying because it was making her worry. The third message had no signature. Just one sentence. "I hope you are all right." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I turned the phone face down without replying. 1 day became 2. 2 became 4. By the end of the week, I had convinced myself distance was the right choice. Every time I thought about returning, I remembered the articles. The influence. The secrets. The enormous gap between his world and mine. The truth was painful but obvious. I was a maid from Queens struggling to pay medical bills. He was one of the most powerful men in the country. Those lives were not supposed to overlap. On Monday morning, I finally returned to work. The estate looked exactly the same. The gardens. The marble halls. The sparkling chandeliers. Yet everything felt different. Staff members greeted me warmly. Several asked where I had been. Even Mrs. Harper looked relieved to see me. But there was one person I managed to avoid all day. Vincent. Every time I sensed he might be nearby, I found another task. Another hallway. Another excuse. By evening, I thought I had succeeded. Then I stepped into the library and froze. He was standing beside the window, alone. Waiting. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Vincent looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. Like someone carrying a weight nobody else could see. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. You disappeared. The disappointment in his voice hurt far more than anger ever could. The disappointment in his voice made it impossible to look away. I gripped the edge of the book cart beside me and forced myself to meet his eyes. I needed time. Vincent nodded slowly. Time for what? The question was gentle. That somehow made it harder to answer. To understand. Silence settled between us. Outside the library windows, evening shadows stretched across the gardens. The last golden light of sunset painted the room in warm colors that felt strangely at odds with the tension in my chest. Vincent took a step closer. Not enough to crowd me. Just enough to make it clear he was listening. Understand what? He asked quietly. I swallowed. You. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he glanced toward the shelves lining the walls. And what exactly did you discover? I laughed softly, though there was no humor in it. That everyone seems to know who you are except me. His expression tightened. Not anger. Regret. Grace. I read the articles. The words escaped before I could stop them. The interviews. The stories. The things people say about you. Vincent looked down briefly before returning his gaze to mine. And now you think differently of me. I wanted to deny it. Instead, I told the truth. I do not know what to think. The honesty hung between us. Heavy. Unavoidable. He exhaled slowly and walked toward the window. For several seconds, he simply stared out at the darkening sky. Most people make up their minds about me before they ever meet me. His voice was calm. Tired. You are the first person who did the opposite. My heart tightened. Vincent, he turned back toward me. You saw the person before the reputation. The sadness in his eyes surprised me. Powerful men were not supposed to look lonely. Yet in that moment, loneliness was exactly what I saw. The reputation exists for a reason, I said softly. I know. Then why did you never tell me? A faint smile appeared. Not happy. Just honest. Because for a little while, I enjoyed being seen as something else. The answer struck harder than I expected. For months, I had assumed I was the one standing outside his world. Suddenly I realized he had been standing outside mine too. Neither of us knew how to cross the distance. A knock interrupted the silence. The library door opened and Daniel stepped inside. Relief flashed across his face the moment he saw Vincent. There you are. Vincent frowned slightly. What happened? Daniel handed him a phone. Your grandmother has been trying to reach you for 30 minutes. Vincent immediately accepted the call. The concern in his expression appeared instantly. Nana, he said. A pause followed. Then another. The tension vanished from his face so quickly it was almost comical. You are fine? I heard an elderly voice speaking rapidly through the receiver. Even from several feet away, I recognized the tone. Vincent closed his eyes. Yes, I understand. Another pause. Then he glanced toward me. His grandmother was still talking. A lot. Finally, a reluctant smile appeared. Fine. We are both here. More talking. Much more talking. When the call finally ended, Vincent lowered the phone and shook his head. She threatened to stop speaking to both of us. Despite everything, I laughed. That sounds like her. His smile lingered. Then he looked directly at me. Grace, whatever you decide about me, decide based on the person you know. Not the stories. And for the first time since I walked back into the estate, I realized my heart had already begun doing exactly that. The weeks that followed felt different. Not because the mansion changed. Not because the city changed. But because I did. The uncertainty that had haunted me for so long slowly began to fade. I stopped measuring Vincent against headlines and assumptions. Instead, I paid attention to the things that mattered. The way he always called his grandmother before important meetings. The way he remembered the names of every employee. The way he quietly helped people without asking for recognition. One cold December evening, the estate hosted its annual holiday gathering for staff and their families. The ballroom glowed with thousands of lights. Children ran between tables laughing while music drifted through the room. My mother sat beside Vincent's grandmother near the fireplace, the two of them talking like lifelong friends. Watching them together made me smile. "They have completely taken over the party," Vincent said beside me. I turned and found him holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. He handed one to me. "Thank you." "You are welcome." We stood quietly for a moment, watching the celebration unfold around us. Snow began falling beyond the tall windows, covering the gardens in white. Everything felt peaceful. Safe. Familiar. Somehow, that realization surprised me most of all. Months earlier, I had entered this estate as someone nobody noticed. Now it felt impossible to imagine my life without the people inside it. Vincent followed my gaze toward the fireplace. "Your mother seems happier." My smile softened. "She is." "Good." I looked at him. "You helped make that happen." He shook his head. "No. She did that herself." The humility in his answer made my chest tighten. For a few seconds neither of us spoke. Then Vincent took a slow breath. The kind people take before saying something important. "Grace." The sound of my name in his voice immediately captured my attention. He turned fully toward me. The lights reflected in his eyes. For once, there was no distance between us. No titles. No expectations. No walls. I spent most of my life believing success meant building something powerful. His voice remained calm. Steady. Honest. "Then you walked into my life carrying an umbrella and a paper bag." I laughed softly. "That is not exactly a dramatic entrance." "It changed everything anyway." My eyes stung unexpectedly. Vincent smiled. Not the guarded smile the world usually saw. The real one. "You never treated me differently because of money." He paused. "You never wanted anything from me." Another pause. "You simply cared." Around us, the party continued. Music. Laughter. Warm light. Yet somehow the rest of the room disappeared. "Grace Carter," he said quietly, "for the first time in a very long time, I know exactly what matters." My heart trembled. "And what is that?" His answer came without hesitation. "You." Tears blurred my vision. Happy tears. The kind that arrive when something finally makes sense. Vincent reached for my hand. I held on. Outside, snow continued to fall across the gardens. Inside, surrounded by the people we loved, I finally understood something simple and true. Sometimes the greatest gift is not being chosen because of who the world thinks you are. Sometimes the greatest gift is being loved because someone sees who you really are.